Hey everyone, I'm David Goldberg with Sarah McGoldrick, and welcome to another episode of Media Gold, a podcast by the Gold Clover Group. And today we're going over, okay, it's not like a regular episode because Sarah got this idea about because everybody's giving gift cards, right,
Yes, yes.
Sarah?
I mean, that's the only thing we can buy these days is gift cards.
So yeah, because so many people are getting gift cards, we thought we'd put together a list of some of our favorite books that you should go out and try to buy with those gift cards, or not go out, get online
Socially
delivery.
distance yourself and order them online or download them or however you read books.
Yeah, I mean, especially people being at home and not being able to go see their families. I think people are looking for a lot of different ways to entertain themselves. Heard a lot of people talking about pulling out the board
Mm-hmm.
games. Uh, with Queen's Gambit on Netflix, people are getting into chess. I have heard a bunch of people talk about that as well. I played chess before; it was cool, just so you know. Anyways, so and reading, the ultimate way to
Yes,
pass time
we're
by.
living in the
So
1800s again, and reading and chess are back on the
yes.
playlist.
It's so true. We've gone back in time 200
Yeah.
years, people. Um, but let me start with a guy that was definitely not from 200 years ago, but actually revolutionized, technology and probably pushed us away from a traditional book in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson. And really interesting background on this book in particular. Walter Isaacson's, famous CNN executive reformer, and Steve Jobs requested specifically that this guy write his biography because he's done several other famous people like Ben Franklin, Albert Einstein. Um, and they wrote this book when he knew that he was dying of, I believe it was pancreatic cancer, and he planned the book to be released when he died because it was terminal and he knew there was no chance he'd survive. So I remember in the fall he died. The book came out, huge success, so interesting. Takes you from like their humble beginnings in the garage, his adoptive parents' garage, and just how he hustled so hard to get his ideas forward. I'm always fascinated reading about Steve Jobs being like the total jerk in the boardroom and not being afraid to question why people are like spending money on something or come up with some idea that's not totally efficient or something that's visionary. His biggest thing was always he was trying to make something for people that they didn't even know they wanted or needed yet, which is really inspiring to read about. And how he had his hands like in every part of the company, including the marketing, which the marketing I feel has gone away from the Steve Jobs style a bit, and it's a bit like more in your face than it used to be. But his footprint's definitely still there and set like an industry standard for how people market technology and really all kinds of products. And I feel like if you listen to some of his high standards, I mean, he wasn't a perfect guy. He was a deadbeat dad,
Mm-hmm.
abandoned his daughter. So, not the greatest guy, left a lot of people in tears, probably backstabbed some people, but really interesting and inspiring read.
Yeah, I find since Steve Jobs died, the build up to their product releases isn't the way it used to be. Like I remember when he used to give one of the presentations when the latest iPhone came out, or when the iPad came out. It was a huge deal, like the second coming sort of thing. And since then, I think he is what kept Apple interesting, and since he's gone, I think it's just very, oh, it's another iPhone, whatever, I guess I have to buy it without the build
Yeah.
up. I mean, you got to give to his credit as well. He's built such brand loyalty that people are going to buy it no matter who's standing up there pointing out the features. But in
Yeah.
the same way, he was really what made the fuss and the fanfare around a product release.
Yeah. It still is like a cult, but when he was the leader of the
Mhm.
cult, it didn't feel so dirty.
Yeah.
um, and next you have The Joy of
Yes,
Writing.
so we've all heard of the joy of cooking and the joy of sex and the the joy of whatever. One of my
Yeah.
favorite books as a writer is The Joy of Writing by Pierre Burton. And I know a lot of, I hate saying this because I'm not that old, but a lot of younger people may not know who Pierre Burton is. But he was one of Canada's greatest writers, greatest journalists, had 50 years, 60 years worth of journalism experience. He wrote right up until right before he died. Um, and he really teaches in his book, The Joy of Writing, how to be a good writer. Anybody these days can be a blogger. Can, we've all seen the, make fast money being a blogger sort of thing. And yeah, that's great. But
Right.
if you want to be a great writer, you've got to read what he has to say, because this is a man who knew his craft. He started out working in the Yukon, um,
Wow.
as a reporter, and like covering the stuff that other people were like, I don't want to do that. Like, and you see it all the time when the CBC has a job posting and it's like way up north, and you're like, I don't want to do that, but that's how you get in there, right? So he knew if he was going to make it as a journalist, he had to do the less than fun things. And from that, he got to explore the world. He got to know his craft. He got to know his sources. He built that trust. Today, new media doesn't do a great job of building trust, and I think that's part of the reason why people like Donald Trump get away with calling all media, or the media he doesn't like, fake news, because the trust and the standards aren't always there anymore, and Pierre stood by those. He stood by good journalism. It wasn't opinionated, or not strongly opinionated. Um, he was committed to getting to the bottom of things, speaking of
Hmm.
the facts and only the facts, and letting the reader, draw from it what they did. He respected the reader, their intelligence. He didn't try to tell them how to think. He let them draw their own conclusions, and hopefully the information he presented, told them the story the way that it should be told. So I highly, highly recommend reading this book and any of Pierre Burton's books, because he's an amazing storyteller. He's done several great books on Canada's history, the good and the bad side of it. So anyone who's interested in writing should really explore Pierre Burton's work.
It's really nice to read about, books about journalists or by
Mm-hmm.
journalists who are still held in such high regard because you and I both work in the media and have worked at like,
Mm-hmm.
newspapers, TV stations or whatever. And, there's a big hostility towards people like, I hear my friends who work in the field, like as camera guys
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, that, people will just come up to them and get in their face about being, wearing a mask and, um, even talking about Trump up here, even though he really has like
Mm-hmm.
no relevance on our
Mm-hmm.
lives. So it's crazy, but so I still hope that in the current generation of journalists and people in the media that we're working with and we're watching right now, will they'll be able to like write
Mm-hmm.
books and actually hold them in high regard. I hope this is like a just a
Yeah.
blip in how the anger against journalism. I kind of feel like there's probably not. There's kind of been a permanent faction, but you have to hope for the best. Um, Okay, get a little lighter here. I wanted to include a hockey book because I love hockey. I've read so many hockey books, and this one was so much different than all of them because it was the most honest hockey book I ever read before. And it's written by Sean Avery. And if you don't know, Sean Avery played in the NHL for several years, most famously with the New York Rangers, LA Kings, Detroit Red Wings for like one season or two seasons. And he was this agitator who, what he did on the ice would just make the regular 6 o'clock news. And he was, considered one of the most like foul mouthed players, but he could be because of this, he could get into the other team's head, so he was considered a real asset. And his career ended a bit short. He just like he was good, but he was like like kind of like a third liner, fourth liner player, always on the fringe. And so this book was about when he gets to the NHL and like how much there is drug use illegal drug use, partying, the really awful things that players say to each other on the ice. And every other hockey book I've read is just very sugar coated. It's like, yep, bunch of professional men going to work, doing their thing. But this really pointed out to some real cultural issues in the NHL, whose their marketing has done, and PR has done a really good job, obviously, of hiding it, because nobody's really talked about this kind of stuff before until maybe the last year or so. So
I think it's
and
interesting too, because I have lots of friends who are um, friends with sports players, or knew these guys when they were still playing, and
Mhm.
very few of them have good words to say about either the players or what was going on behind the scenes. I think the hockey establishment, or just the sports establishment, has done a great job of turning them into gods without realizing or letting the public know what's really going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Um, and one more thing about his book, after he left the NHL and retired, he's still a pretty young guy, so now he's pursuing a career as a professional actor, but also in fashion journalism. While he was still an NHL player, he did a summer as an intern at Vogue.
Oh, wow.
It was really interesting guy.
But you got to have other avenues. Some of these guys, they only end up playing a few years. They think they're going to be lifers, but not
Hmm.
everyone is a Wayne Gretzky, as hockey parents eventually learn, and you've got to have a fallback. I mean, I've seen and heard so many stories of these young hockey players who get millions handed to them, and so they
Yeah.
become real rich real fast. So they buy the fancy cars, they buy the cottage up in Muskoka, and they just blow through their money. They're not investing it. They're just having a great time with, the girls and the drugs and I'm not saying all of hockey's like that, but there, like you said, there is a strong presence of it. And then within a few years, they're broke. So, yeah.
Yep. So many stories like that. But so you have a CBC gem. See what I did
Indeed,
there?
you did.
Interesting story.
I'm sure CBC will appreciate the plug. So I couldn't narrow it down to one book. It's just the series in general, and I'm talking about the Vinyl Cafe. So many people have heard the Vinyl Cafe on the CBC. Uh, Stuart McLean telling the stories. Dave cooks a turkey, being the classic, especially this time of year. But many, many, many more. The stories of Dave and Morley and their kids. Just the life of being a couple and a family, and all the things that happen to you, just the day to day. And the reason I picked
Hmm.
this, yeah, the stories are cute and they're sweet, but they're so well written, so observational. Stuart McLean didn't just, you know, write this stuff down and just hope it was good. He was observing the world around him. He was drawing from experiences. He was, using his own audience as inspiration, and turning them into books
Hmm.
and stories. And he taught, I think, in his writing, that words are important. Yes, they're short stories. They're not overly complex, but the words matter, and that's what makes the stories so enduring. To use a word for it. Like,
Hmm.
people are so excited when they know that Vinyl Cafe is going to be on the CBC again. I mean, they made a big announcement a week earlier in the week saying, after the holidays, they're going to put on a special broadcast with a few of the stories. So, he's taught that words matter, and again, for writers, it's really important to understand that what you're writing has to mean something. But he also teaches that all voices matter. He looked to his audience to share their stories, and it didn't matter where they came from, what their background was. Their words and their journeys mattered, and he made that part of the broadcast that he did, and the books that he wrote. And to add to that, he would dig to find out what mattered. He didn't just do the Vinyl Cafe. He also did
Right.
he did some Morningside with Peter Zosky, and again, that was telling the stories, Canadian stories, stories that mattered. You know, we all know a bizarre story from when we grew up as a kid, or just something odd about our town. And as weird as these stories are, they're the stories that we tell over and over and over again because they matter. And that's what Stewart did. And anyone who loves a good story needs to explore this series.
Well, it's so awesome they're letting it, live on even after his
Mhm.
passing, and hopefully we'll see like that caliber of content again one day from like a new voice or a new
Yeah. Well,
generation.
he had such a distinct voice as well. And I used to drive everybody
Mhm.
crazy. I would go on like these long drives with people and throw on the Vinyl Cafe, and they just have to sit there and listen to it. And they loved it. They loved it. I mean, I remember doing trips down to like Buffalo at Christmas time with my mom, and I'd throw a Vinyl Cafe CD on, and we would just listen to it the whole way there. It was great. They were just great stories.
That's
Yep.
amazing. And obviously brings a lot of like good memories from you
Exactly.
hanging out
Yeah.
with your mom and stuff too. So that's awesome. Mine is this book that's actually not available until January 7th, 2021. But I had a recent opportunity through another job to work with these people and get to know their story. It's a couple sisters. They're from Massachusetts, and they wrote this book called Burnout, which offers a science based plan to help minimize stress, manage emotions, and live a more joyful life. And they talk a lot about taking care of yourself, exercising regularly, and just trying to build yourself up and don't become a victim of emotional exhaustion. And you just have to really take care of your brain because it's the most important part of your body at the end of the day. And so I wanted to bring this to the table just because I think in the marketing industry in general, if you work in any kind of media, it's all about hustle, and especially after this year, a lot of people working from home. Okay, some people, you know who you are, have had it actually pretty good working
Mhm.
at home, but there is a whole group of people out there who are really struggling. People who don't have families, and they're basically just sentenced to stay in their 500 square foot condo by themselves, and it's like solitary confinement. It's going to be mentally devastating, and you might just like try to pour yourself in work. But this book kind of talks about you have to find other things besides work that bring you joy, and invest in tapping into other people's of your other parts of your brain. So I just thought it was a really important message because I know like hustling is, they call it a side hustle, and you got to hustle, but it's not worth sacrificing your health, for a little bit of extra money. So just take a moment, think about the important things, and play the guitar, do writing for fun. Don't have to be writing blog posts and web copy all the time. Tackle a new like fiction story, or write a poem, or just write about a real life topic that you're super interested in.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen in the last few weeks, and I mean, the holidays don't help, is people are just exhausted. I must hear 20 times a day someone just saying, "I'm tired," like because the pandemic has reached a point where we've adapted to it. We get it, we can handle it, but we're exhausted by it now because we're trying to live through a pandemic with work, live through a pandemic with family, and people are just worn out. And I remember Ariana Huffington of the Huffington Post
Hmm.
wrote I haven't read this book, but she wrote a book called Thrive, I believe, that talked about the same thing, just the exhaustion. I can't believe it. I can't remember if it was Thrive or another one. I know she's done a few books, but she talked about how one day she just collapsed. She was at the office and she collapsed because she was just exhausted from pushing herself too hard. And that was sort of her moment of awakening when she realized that you can't be all things to everybody. You have to let yourself
Hmm.
rest. You have to, learn to say no. You have to do what's good for you. You can't spend your entire life trying to please everyone because you hurt yourself more.
Exactly. I long time ago I made a decision that no matter how much I liked work or how important something was, there was always going to be a certain boundary or like line that I wouldn't cross or wouldn't let myself get into that kind of territory because I don't want to miss time with family and other important stuff in life. So
Exactly, exactly. So the last one that we're going to talk about is kind of an odd choice, I think, but a relevant one as well. And that's Cold Hard Truth on Business, Money, and Life by Kevin O'Leary. So the reason I picked this one for myself, not because, like, obviously I respect Kevin O'Leary and his work, um, but
hmm
it was sort of how I found this book. So I was probably in my mid 20s, and you kind of reach that point of your life where you're like, how do I make money? Is it always going to be, me working 9 to 5? Like, how do I get ahead?
right,
And he had just released this book. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll just read this and see if there's any tips. And this was like the height of the Dragon's Den. And, everybody thought he was like
right,
this real cool business guy. And, if anyone knew, it would be him. And I thought, well, I mean, worst case, I'm just going to get some pointers. Um, but then I read it, and he shared his journey, like his honest journey from, he worked in an ice cream shop where he got like fired, and it destroyed him. He was so upset that he'd been fired from a job, and he was like, I'm never letting this happen again. I'm building my own business. So there's, stories of like business inspiration like that, but there's also just common money sense and life sense and, setting yourself up for, no matter what job you're doing or if you're in between jobs, this is how you at least minimize the risk to yourself financially. I mean, we learned this year, if nothing else, that you've got to have some cash saved. You've got to have, like a backup plan for when things go wrong. And a lot of people discovered real fast that they were not ready. I mean, even myself, like I maintained a job all the way through the pandemic to this point, but it was just that, I could just as easily lose my job if
yeah.
things got difficult for my boss. So what am I doing to mitigate that risk? And it was like, oh, these are the things that Kevin O'Leary told me about, 10 years ago that I just kind of,
Yeah.
kept going through life like, la, 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 it's never going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And then boom, so these books, and there's lots of them out there, so you have to be careful about, again, whose advice you're taking. But he's very
Yeah.
blunt. He's very straightforward. He also teaches you to take risks. I mean, you don't become a multimillionaire by just sitting around waiting for deals to land in your lap. He took risks, but he knows his business, and you've seen him on Dragon's Den, or I guess he's on. What's he? I'm so Canadian. What's the new one? He's a
Sure thing.
Shark Tank. I'm so Canadian. Um, where if he doesn't, believe that the business is viable, he's not going to risk his money, you know. And
hmm
again, it goes back to what you were talking about in burnout. You have to learn to say no, because you take on something that's going to be more work than it's worth, and you're going to end up losing money, and you're just going to end up hurting yourself more. You're not going to gain anything. So this book, Cold Hard Truth, is just like all encompassing, and it's worth it. And what's in there would still be relevant today, absolutely. And he's done many books since then. So
I gotta
yep,
ask you. I gotta go back to the ice cream
yeah.
shop. How did he get fired? Do you remember
I
from when
Oh
you read the
god, it was
book?
so long ago. I don't remember how he got fired. I remember the reaction more than anything else. Like, cuz he said like
Yeah.
he was nearly in tears. I just don't think it was a good fit for him. And I think a lot of people don't realize, and I had to learn this too, you're not meant for every job. And if you get fired, if a job doesn't work out, that's okay. It just meant you weren't meant to be there. So
I had that kind of experience in high school, and I got a job at HMV. If you don't know, it was a record
way
store
back
or
then.
CD store. don't exist doesn't exist anymore. But going through high school, I got it when I was in grade 12, I think, or grade 11, and I always thought like that'd be like the coolest job ever. You just get to like work with other people who like
Mhm.
music. You get to talk to people who like music too, who come in all the time. And then I got the job and I got hired for the Christmas rush. And, it was just people helping people find DVD copies of the Santa
Mhm.
Claus and answering really weird questions and stocking shelves. And I remember I actually got fired because um, they would have these mystery shoppers come in that would just test your knowledge of how good you were in the store. And then they report back to the manager, try and flush out the bad
Mhm.
people. And one of them, I guess, approached me and asked me for something. And I think it was like a really crazy day. And I didn't like searching stuff on their computer because it was this old like MS
Oh, yeah.
DOS system that was like it would like be flipped backwards, and there was a special like four key stroke you did to switch it back the right way. So I just said, oh, we don't have like that CD in stock she was looking for. And she's like, could you search like for another store? And I think I said something like, oh, you should try
Oh,
Sunrise
no.
Records, because they were like across the hall. And that doesn't exist anymore either, I don't
No,
think.
no.
And so I guess, yeah, obviously she told my manager. And then I got a call. I remember sitting with my parents at dinner. I pick up the phone and they're like, this is so and so from HMV. Your services are no longer required. And then they just hung up. And my parents were like, who was that? And I was like, oh, I think I just got laid off from my job.
It's like working for Apple and telling people to go buy Google.
Yeah, pretty much. So that was my dumb mistake when I was younger. They got me let go from a
But,
job. I think I've come a long way
looking
since then.
back now, I mean, are you upset that you lost that job? Probably not. I mean, it was a life lesson, but
Yeah,
if you were, again, you probably just weren't meant to be there. And you just move
I
on
think
and you
so.
find something else better and happier. And, you just have to allow yourself to just keep on moving. And again, that's what Cold Hearts
Mhm.
Truth does because, like Kevin O'Leary started in this spot and he had, lots of highs and lows along the way, but look where he is now. So you got to respect the guy and it's a book worth checking out.
Well, we hope you found, our tips, or rather our books, helpful to you. Maybe you'll go consider checking them out with all your gift cards you're probably going to get from everybody this year. So send us your digital marketing questions as always at www.goldclovergroup.com, or find us on social media on all the channels at Gold Clover Group.
And don't forget to catch us every Wednesday wherever you listen to your podcast.